but lots of things can't be relied on from one moment to another, and you don't know what direction it's going to turn. So the way that life deals with that is by producing a plethora of variants and basically letting anything that doesn't work die. So evolution requires an awful lot of death. You know, and there's ideas that what we've done to some degree is we've internalized the evolutionary process because we can invent fictional representatives of ourselves, right, which would be our potential future selves, and we could run simulations of the environment and kill off all those potential future selves that don't look like they would actually survive. And that's really what we think about as thinking. Okay, so, alright, so then the next thing you might ask yourself about, given that, is, and we're going to shift bases here a little bit, is how would you define reality? If you had to come up with a definition of what constituted real, how would you go about doing it? And I would say the way the West does this, there's a schizophrenic element to it, a split element. There's an incoherence in it, and I haven't heard anyone else make this argument, so if you can figure out some reason why it's stupid, then let me know. But so think about it this way, like our basic presumptions about the world are materialistic, right? Now, and I would say that those materialistic assumptions were basically laid down at the beginning of the scientific endeavor, and so that would be about the time of Bacon and Descartes. And so, because they sort of laid the foundations for modern science. And there's some rules about what things are in reality, and the rules are something like, well, things are made out of littler things, and then if you go all the way down to the level where the littlest thing possible is, well, that's where you find the fundamental constituent elements of reality. And so and matter is detectable by the senses, and it's intersubjectively detectable. So you can detect something with your senses, fundamentally, or with the extension of your senses. You can describe how you went about detecting it. Other people can duplicate that, and then they can report what they detect, and if the reports are similar, then we assume that that thing is real. So in some sense, it's what our senses already do, right? Because our senses triangulate in a sense. So how do you figure out if something's real? Well, if you can see it, you know, that's pretty good. But it's better if you can see it and hear it. And it's better yet if you can see it and hear it and touch it. And maybe it's better if you could see it and hear it and touch it and taste it, and so forth. And you know, we've evolved these sensory systems that are quite different from a qualitative perspective. And if they all report the same thing, then we believe we have a pretty reasonable chance of actually believing that that thing is there. And then with science, we've actually extended that capacity because we don't just use the senses of one person, we use our senses in a rigorous and collective manner, and that reports to us the nature of what we've come to call the objective world. And then we say, well, accurate descriptions of the objective world are true. It's like, you know, that's a good theory, and you can also certainly see its objective utility. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. It's pragmatic utility, because when you play by the rules of science, it appears that your power expands, right? So that's another reason why we think it's true. You run through these routines, and then all of a sudden you could do things you couldn't do before. And that's a different criteria of truth, right? That's more like a criteria of usefulness, and a practical usefulness, because you would think too that, and this is why Jung thought that science was actually embedded inside a narrative, in a deeper narrative. You know, we wouldn't be doing science if we didn't think it was useful for something, right? And then you might think, well, useful for what? And then, well, what would you say? Maybe you suffer less because of science, maybe you live longer because of science, maybe you find life more interesting, you could do a more diverse range of things, whatever.